Galactic Empire panics. That ship's not in any archives. And it's breaking all the rules. The silence within monitoring Spire 7 Alpha was not an absence of sound. It was a presence. It was the sound of perfect, frictionless order. A hum so constant and pure, it was indistinguishable from thought itself. Analyst Shale Node was a part of that order. Her crystalline form was fused to the Spire's central console. Her consciousness was integrated with the flow of data that was the lifeblood of the Axiom Ascendancy. For 1,000 cycles, her Spire had monitored this silent expanse of space. She watched the stately, predictable procession of Axiom vessels as they moved along the pre-calculated lines of the Great Lattice. It was a task of supreme importance and supreme monotony. Then, a discordant note appeared. A flicker at the edge of the holographic display. It was not a ship. It could not be. It was a flaw, a brief stutter in the flawless projection of space-time. Shale Node's focus sharpened. The flicker resolved into an icon. It was a sickly, undefined shape, colored a hue of white that her processors labeled unclassified. It had no IFF tag. It had no declared trajectory. It simply was. A system alert chimed. Unidentified contact, Sector 7 Alpha. Trajectory, unregistered. IFF, null. It was a logical impossibility. Shale Node accessed her internal log. Her thoughts were precise and cold. Diagnostic initiated, she thought. There can be no errors in the lattice. An unregistered contact is a contradiction. The sensor array must be degrading. She ran the full diagnostic suite. It was a deep-level interrogation of every crystal and conduit in her Spire. The process was swift and mercilessly efficient. As it ran, she watched the anomaly. It wasn't moving in a way she could comprehend. It did not travel from point A to point B. Instead, it would vanish from one coordinate and reappear at another several thousand kilometers away an instant later. It was a violation of momentum, a heresy against physics. The system alert returned. Diagnostic complete. All systems at 100% efficiency. Contact remains. For the first time in her existence, Analyst Shale Node experienced an emotion. Her species had long since engineered out of their collective consciousness. She felt cognitive dissonance. The data was perfect. The system was perfect. Yet, the impossible was still there. A smudge of chaos on the canvas of order. This was not an unregistered variable. It was a refutation of the axiom itself. As the unclassified icon flickered once more, appearing closer, a new sensation rippled through her crystalline mind. It was a messy, illogical, and deeply unsettling cascade of subroutines. She could only identify it through ancient linguistic archives. It was fear. The bridge of the Ascendancy flagship, immutable truth, was a monument to absolute authority. It was a vast, cavernous space, carved from a single obsidian asteroid. Glowing lines of pure energy served as walkways and consoles. At its heart, upon a throne of polished black stone, sat High Commander Orthoclase Vector. His multifaceted eyes surveyed a dozen holographic displays. Each one detailed the flawless assimilation of the Tathlar hegemony. This was the 47th species to be absorbed into the Ascendancy's perfect order. It was a mundane affair. Proceeding with the usual predictability. A soft chime signaled a priority alert. It was the only sound permitted to break the bridge's reverent silence. Vector's gaze shifted to the incoming message from the outer spires. It was from Sector 7 Alpha, another sensor glitch from the outer spires, Orthoclase Vector stated. His voice was a low, grinding resonance. He did not turn to his subcommander, a towering crystalline form standing silently nearby. Remind Analyst Shale Node that imagining flaws is a flaw in itself. Sir, the subcommander's voice was unnaturally flat. The alert has been corroborated. Spire 6 Alpha and 8 Alpha confirm the contact. Its velocity is theoretical. At best, our systems indicate it does not adhere to the principles of conventional momentum. That caught the High Commander's full attention. He gestured, and the main holographic display shifted. It moved from the subjugation of Tathlar to the stark, empty grid of Sector 7. There it was, a single, defiant point of unclassified light. He watched the logs as the object blinked across the sector. Each reappearance was a logical refutation of the last. His analytical mind, honed over centuries of command, processed the impossibility. This was not a censor ghost. Ghosts were random. This was intentional. As he watched, the icon altered its path. The new projected trajectory was an elegant, horrifying arc. It pointed directly toward the Ascendancy's core systems, the very heart of their empire. The casual randomness was gone, replaced by clear, undeniable intent. Alert the High Council, Orthoclase Vector commanded. His voice lost its bored edge, replaced by the sharp crackle of authority. Mobilize the first and third defensive echelons. I want every available vessel moved to intercept coordinates. This is not a glitch. It is an incursion. The subcommander moved to carry out the orders. The clicks of his crystalline limbs echoed in the sudden tension of the bridge. Orthoclase Vector remained on his throne, his gaze fixed on the impossible. His initial annoyance had sublimated into a cold, focused analysis. He had crushed rebellions, absorbed empires, and enforced the axiom's perfect order across 1,000 worlds. He had grown bored with the lack of challenge, the sheer, crushing predictability of it all. But this was new. For the first time in centuries, Orthoclase Vector felt a flicker of an old, almost forgotten sensation. It was the sharp, clarifying thrill of facing a genuine, incomprehensible threat. And it was magnificent. The bridge of the UES venture was a study in controlled chaos. Unlike the sterile cathedrals of the Axiom, this space was alive. It was cramped, functional, and deeply human. A faded photograph of a green Earth valley was taped to one monitor. A persistent coffee stain formed a miniature nebula on a side console. The captain's chair had a patch of worn fabric on the left armrest, where its occupant had clearly gripped it during turbulence. This was not a monument. It was a workshop, a home, and humanity's single, defiant step into the great unknown. Captain Eva Rostova felt the thrum of the experimental probability drive through the deck plates. It was a constant, reassuring hum. She surveyed her crew, a hand-picked team of the best and brightest Earth had to offer, and felt a profound sense of pride. They were it. They were the first. Every light year they crossed was a new page in the human story. Captain, the energy readings are off the charts, Dr. Eris Thorne called out from his science station. His voice buzzed with an excitement he didn't bother to hide. Orderly, structured. AK-2 civilization, at least. We're close. Whatever's out there, it's vast and incredibly advanced. Rostova's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment. The culmination of a decade of work, the dream of a species. All right, people, this is it, she said, her voice steady and clear over the bridge comms. The moment we've all been working for. Let's make a good first impression. Lisa, she nodded to her communications officer. Prepare the first contact package. The universal constants, the periodic table, the best of Bowie playlist. A ripple of appreciative laughter went through the bridge, momentarily breaking the tension. Slowing to observation speed, the navigator announced. His knuckles were white on the controls. We're getting a lot of passive sensor pings, Captain. I think they see us. Rostova leaned forward in her chair. Her gaze was fixed on the main viewer, which currently showed nothing but the swirling dust of a nearby nebula. She felt the immense weight of her position. A single human carrying the hopes and fears of 8 billion souls on her shoulders. She dreamt of a handshake across the stars, of shared knowledge, of humanity finally taking its place in a vibrant galactic community. She imagined welcoming alien ships to Earth, the celebrations, the beginning of a new golden age. Her crew shared her dream. Their faces, illuminated by the soft glow of their consoles, were a mixture of nervous energy and the pure, unadulterated excitement of discovery. They were explorers on the edge of the map, blissfully, completely unaware that the natives they were about to meet had already labeled them a cosmic horror. The UES venture drifted silently at the edge of the swirling nebula. It was a lone ship against a backdrop of cosmic dust and nascent starlight. On the bridge, the crew held a collective breath. Their eyes scanned consoles for any sign of a response, any hint of the civilization that lay hidden beyond the veil of gas and shadow. They were prepared for anything. A hail in an unknown language, a probe sent to investigate, or even a long, cautious silence. They were not prepared for the void to break apart. Without warning, reality fractured. The space around them, once empty, was suddenly, impossibly full. One moment there was nothing. The next, more than 200 monolithic vessels materialized from the darkness. They did not arrive with the bright flash of a conventional FTL exit. They simply appeared, silent and absolute. Their crystalline hulls drank the starlight and reflected nothing. They were jagged, sharp-angled things, more like weapons than ships. They formed a perfect, inescapable sphere around the tiny human vessel. On every alien ship, weapon ports slid open, glowing with the cold, blue-white energy of imminent death. On the bridge of the Venture, the casual excitement evaporated. It was replaced by a stunned, electric silence. Whoa. The navigator breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Okay, so much for a subtle welcome. They're hailing us. Lisa reported from the comm station. Her fingers hesitated over the console. Open a channel, Rostova commanded. Her voice was a bastion of calm in the sudden storm of adrenaline. Let's say hello. The main viewer, which had shown only stars, now displayed the severe, multifaceted face of High Commander Orthoclase Vector. His image was stark. His presence radiated an ancient and implacable authority. When he spoke, the universal translator rendered his resonant voice into a sound as cold and hard as chipped flint. Unknown vessel. You have violated axiom space. You are unregistered. Your method of transit is a breach of cosmic law. Power down all systems. Prepare to be boarded. You have one cycle. The message was not a greeting. It was a sentence that Rostova's mind raced. This was no welcoming committee. This was a military blockade of overwhelming force. She met the unblinking gaze of the alien commander on her screen. Lisa, she said, her voice low but firm. Never. Breaking eye contact with the screen. Tell him we come in peace. Tell him we are unarmed explorers and representatives of the human race from the planet Earth. The message was sent. There was no reply. The countdown timer that had appeared on their screen continued its silent, inexorable descent. Rostova felt a profound confusion warring with her survival instincts. This reaction was wildly disproportionate. It was not caution. It was sheer, unadulterated panic on a fleet-wide scale. The question echoed in the sudden, tense silence of her bridge. It was a question more pressing than the 200 warships aimed at her hull. What in God's name are they so afraid of? The airlock of the Venture hissed open. It revealed not a diplomatic party, but a phalanx of crystalline soldiers. They moved with unnerving geometric precision. Their armor reflected the human ship's lighting in 1,000 sharp angles. At their head was High Commander Orthoclase Vector. His imposing form filled the corridor. He stepped aboard, his heavy feet meeting the deck, plating with a solid thud. He immediately felt a sense of profound unease. The ship was an architectural nightmare. The corridor was rounded, a structurally inefficient shape that wasted space. Conduits and pipes were exposed along the ceiling. They were inelegantly bundled rather than seamlessly integrated into the hull. The very air felt wrong. A chaotic mix of recycled oxygen, faint traces of organic compounds, and the aroma of the hot, dark liquid. The captain was holding Vector's subcommander ran a scanner along the wall. Commander, the hull composition is a crude metallic alloy. Heavy, inefficient, and layered. It is as if it compensates for weakness rather than designing for strength. As they proceeded toward the bridge, the illogical design choices multiplied. Vector saw a small, leafy organism growing in a ceramic pot near a viewport. He saw a flat, printed image of a canine creature affixed to a workstation. It was a vessel of inexplicable sentimentality and baffling inefficiency. This was not the work of an advanced species. It was the work of primitives that he swept onto the bridge. His soldiers fanned out to secure the room. The human crew remained at their stations. Their expressions were a mixture of apprehension and defiance. Captain Eva Rostova stood to greet him, holding a ceramic mug. She was smaller than he'd expected. Her biology was fragile and soft. "High Commander," she said, her voice betraying no fear. "Welcome aboard the US Venture. It's a bit of a long trip to our detention facility. Can I offer you a drink? Coffee. It's a mild stimulant." Vector's universal translator struggled to find an appropriate analog for the offer. A psychoactive beverage, offered to a hostile boarding party as a gesture of what? Hospitality? Insanity. "Your vessel's architecture is chaotic," Vector stated, his own voice a low vibration. It lacks structural clarity and purpose. Rostova glanced around her bridge. We call it cozy. It feels like home. Please, have a seat. She gestured to the command chair she had just vacated. This was the most unsettling gesture of all. A commander did not cede their throne. It was a symbol of absolute authority. To offer it to an enemy was a sign of either complete submission or a level of confidence so absolute it bordered on madness. Vector chose to remain standing. He tried to reconcile the paradox. The ship was a primitive, sentimental mess. The crew consumed mind-altering substances while on duty. The captain was unervingly calm and offered gestures of welcome to an overwhelming military force. Yet this same species had mastered a form of transit that broke the known laws of physics. They were a contradiction, a chaotic element that defied classification. Orthoclase Vector was beginning to understand that a species that unpredictable was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The engine room of the Venture was an assault on Orthoclase Vector's ordered sensibilities. It was a dense thicket of thick cables, humming power converters, and glowing coolant pipes. They were all crammed into a space that seemed far too small. It was loud, hot, and smelled faintly of ozone and heated metal. This was not the silent, sacred heart of a starship. It was a blacksmith's forge, a place of brute force and barely controlled energy. At its center was a pulsating sphere of contained light. It was surrounded by a chaotic lattice of focusing crystals and heavy-duty magnetic coils. Standing before it was the human scientist, Dr. Eris Thorne. He was young, his uniform was untucked, and there was a smudge of what looked like grease on his cheek. He beamed at the assembled Axiom science team with an unnerving lack of solemnity. "Welcome, welcome," he said. He grabbed a stylus and turned to a large, surprisingly primitive whiteboard mounted on the bulkhead. "The captain said you were interested in our little P drive. It's actually quite simple when you stop thinking about space as something you have to push through." With a few swift strokes, he sketched a crude line representing space-time. "See, linear travel is just so inefficient. All that energy wasted fighting inertia and relativistic effects. Why push through space-time when you can just step around it?" He drew a second, arcing line that bypassed a large section of the first. "The trick isn't raw power. It's predictive calculation. Our drive doesn't propel the ship. It runs trillions of quantum simulations per second to determine the most probable, lowest energy path to a destination." He tapped the whiteboard for emphasis. "We just ask the universe where we're most likely to be next. Then we give it a little nudge with a focused energy burst to assert our quantum state, and poof, we're there. We're not really traveling, you see. We're just becoming." Orthoclase Vector watched as his own science officers recoiled. Their crystalline forms vibrated with a horrified resonance. One of them leaned toward him, its translated whisper barely audible over the engine's hum. "Hi, Commander. He speaks of manipulating causality as if it were a simple engineering problem. This is heresy against the fundamental laws of physics. They are asserting their existence over the established reality of the axiom." Dr. Thorne, oblivious to their horror, continued sketching with infectious enthusiasm. "The real beauty is in the tactical application. With enough processing power, you can make dozens of micro-assertions per second. It's not teleportation. That's far too messy. Think of it more like skipping a stone across the surface of a pond. We're just skipping across the surface of reality." And there it was. In that moment, Orthoclase Vector finally, truly understood. He had come aboard expecting to find a new type of engine, a new weapon, a technology that could be categorized and countered. He was wrong. The humans had not built a better engine. They had weaponized mathematics. They had turned probability into a tool. They did not obey the sacred, immutable laws of the universe. They bargained with them, coaxed them, and bent them to their will. This drive was not just a technology. It was a philosophy, a worldview so alien and so terrifyingly powerful that it made the Ascendancy's millennia of ordered control seem like a child's sandcastle waiting for the tide. The grand chamber of the Axiom Ascendancy existed outside of normal space-time. It was a pocket dimension of absolute silence and stillness, where the 33 members of the High Council convened. They were not individuals in the way softer species understood the term. They were ancient, massive crystalline entities, living mountains of logic and memory that had guided the ascendancy for millennia. They did not speak. They communicated through complex, resonating patterns of light that pulsed from within their core that orthoclase vectors report manifested as a holographic sphere in the center of the chamber. It showed the footage from the US venture. The inefficient, rounded corridors. The illogical sentimentality of a potted plant. The chaotic mess of the engine room. And most damningly, the young human with the grease on his cheek, gleefully scrawling universe-altering equations on a primitive whiteboard. Attending the session as an observer was Emissary Revix of the Kythar Dominion. He was avian, sleek and feathered. His species valued grace and prestige above all else. His translated thoughts sliced through the silent chamber, sharp and contemptuous. These soft-fleshed bipeds have stumbled upon a power they cannot possibly comprehend. Their ship is an offense to design. Their crew is a collection of undisciplined primitives. They are children playing with cosmic fire. The council ignored the emissary's emotional outburst. They were processing the data with cold, terrifying logic. The human vessel was an aesthetic and engineering failure. Its crew was informal and emotional. By every metric the ascendancy used to measure a species' worth, the humans were laughably inferior, but the technology, the drive, the light within the chamber began to shift. The patterns coalesced into a unified, chilling consensus. A query pulsed. The human paradox, primitive biology, transcendent technology. Analysis shows this combination represents unquantifiable chaos. Another pattern formed. A hypothesis. Their expansion is inevitable. Their philosophy is anathema to order. The risk of their influence is unacceptable. The light of the 33 entities pulsed as one. A conclusion. A final, cold judgment that sealed humanity's fate. They are a destabilizing element. A virus of uncertainty in the perfect system. Containment is the primary objective. Elimination is the logical contingency. The fear in the chamber was not hot, like that of organic species. It was a cold, perfect dread. It was the fear a flawless crystal might feel at the presence of a single, spreading fracture. The ascendancy had built its empire on the principle of absolute, unchanging order. Humanity was not a rival power to be subjugated. They were a philosophical contagion, a vibrant, chaotic, and unpredictable force that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the axiom's perfect, stagnant reality. The children playing with cosmic fire had to be extinguished before they set the galaxy ablaze. Deep beneath the windswept plains of the North American continent, Global Defense Command was a silent hive of activity. Here, humanity's watchmen kept their vigil over the solar system. Admiral Kenji Tanaka stood before the central holographic display, his face grim. On the TAC map, a single friendly icon, the US venture, was a lonely green spark in an ocean of black. It had been silent for 12 hours. It had violated a check-in protocol that was never, ever missed. The last data packet they had received was a garbled, compressed burst of sensor readings. It was transmitted just moments before the venture went dark. The command's AI had spent hours reconstructing it. Now, the result filled the hologram. The lone green icon of the venture was surrounded. Not by a dozen ships, or even 50. It was surrounded by more than 200 hostile contacts. Each one possessed an energy signature that dwarfed Earth's most powerful vessels. The scale of the force was breathtaking. President Helen Du Bois stood beside him. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. She was a civilian, a diplomat by trade, but she understood the brutal calculus of the image before her. This wasn't a greeting committee, was it, Kenji? She asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. No, Madam President, Tanaka replied. His eyes traced the perfect, menacing geometry of the alien formation. This was a cage. They were waiting for her. There was no debate. There was no hesitation. The room was filled with a quiet, unified resolve. The protocol was simple, unspoken, and absolute. 12 ships, Tanaka stated, turning to the president. That's our entire first response fleet. Everything we have that's equipped with a production model probability drive. We'll be leaving Earth completely defenseless against a similar incursion. It's a huge gamble. President Du Bois met his gaze. In her eyes, Tanaka saw the same steely determination that had defined humanity's crawl from its cradle. We don't leave our people behind, Kinji. Ever. She straightened, her voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument. They went out there to represent us, to carry our hopes to the stars. Now we go out there to bring them home. She turned to the command staff assembled in the room. Launch the fleet. Send the resolve. Admiral Tanaka nodded. A flicker of fierce pride cut through his concern. This was his species at its best. Not conquerors. Not assimilators. Protectors. He turned to his command console and opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice was the calm center of the coming storm. This is Admiral Tanaka. Authorization, Du Bois Alpha. Execute Operation Homecoming. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. Across the solar system, from hidden bases on Mars to orbital shipyards above Luna, humanity's hidden strength began to stir. 12 ships, the culmination of a secret technological revolution, prepared to slice their way across the galaxy. They were impossibly outnumbered. They were heading into a confrontation with a power they could not possibly comprehend. But they were going anyway. Because one of their own was in trouble, the High Commander Orthoclase Vector's fleet held its perfect formation around the captured human vessel. The Axiom's control over this small pocket of space was absolute. It was a crystalline cage of overwhelming power. His science teams were still analyzing the data from the venture. His tacticians were developing contingencies for this new, chaotic variable. Everything was proceeding with logical, predictable efficiency. And then the universe broke. It happened without a sound, without a flash, without any detectable energy release. One instant, the space beyond his fleet was empty. The next, 12 new contacts were there. They did not arrive. They did not exit from FTL. They simply materialized into being, simultaneously, at 12 distinct points encompassing his entire fleet. They formed a perfect, system-wide sphere of their own. A ghost fleet that had appeared from nowhere. They were smaller than his cruisers, sleek and dark. They bore the same chaotic design philosophy as the captured ship. They did not hail. They did not power their weapon systems. They just sat there. Their presence was a silent, glaring refutation of every known law of strategic deployment, but on the bridge of the immutable truth, the tactical AI's synthesized voice was tinged with something that almost sounded like digital confusion. Warning. 12 contacts have materialized. Their entry vectors are non-existent. They did not travel here. They are simply here. Impossible. Vector resonated. His gaze swept across the holographic display where the 12 new, unclassified icons pulsed with a steady, unnerving light. Track them. I want their propulsion signatures analyzed. I want their point of origin. Tracking is negative. High Commander, the AI responded. They are not moving. But their quantum signature is fluid. They are not fixed points in spacetime. They exist in a state of perpetual probability. Vector stared at the display. A state of perpetual probability. The words were meaningless. A string of logical absurdities. And yet, the evidence was before him. 12 enemy ships, holding his entire armada in a perfect tactical envelopment they had achieved in 0 seconds. This was not a fleet that had traveled here. It was a cohort of ghosts, summoned from the ether. This was not a rescue mission. It was a demonstration of a power so far beyond his own, he lacked the vocabulary to even describe it. His cage had, in an instant, become his prison. For a long moment, the void was still. A silent standoff between the rigid geometry of the Axiom fleet and the impossible sphere of the human vessels. High Commander Orthoclase Vector's mind raced. He attempted to process the tactical heresy before him. His entire military doctrine was based on predictable vectors, shield geometry, and energy weapon convergence. The humans adhered to none of these principles. They were a tactical unknown. But the ascendancy did not retreat from the unknown. It assimilated it, or it erased it. All ships, Vector's command resonated through his fleet's psychic network. It was a wave of pure logic and intent. Target the nearest human vessel. Fire on my mark. Annihilate. 200 Axiom cruisers, each one a testament to millennia of military perfection, powered their primary weapons. A terrifying amount of energy converged on a single point in space. It was aimed where the human flagship, the UES Resolve, floated silently. Mark. A storm of incandescent energy, enough to crack a small moon, tore through the void. It struck nothing. In the instant before the Axiom weapons fired, the resolve had simply ceased to be there. It did not jump away. It just was not there anymore. An instant later, it reappeared, perfectly motionless, deep inside Vector's formation. It was directly off the port side of his own command ship. Before the immutable truth's automated defenses could even register the new threat, the other 11 human ships moved. They did not move in formation, but as individuals. A flurry of impossible reapparitions. One blinked into existence directly above a cruiser. Another 1,000 kilometers below. They danced between his ships, a ballet of quantum improbability. They moved without acceleration, without inertia, appearing and disappearing like afterimages in a dream. Recalculate. Retarget. Vector commanded. His own logic circuits screamed at the impossibility of it all. His ships tried to turn, tried to track, but how could they target an enemy that did not travel? How could they fight a foe that treated three-dimensional space like a casual suggestion? Then came the punctuation mark. From the Resolve's new position, a single, thin beam of golden light lanced out. It was not a blast of overwhelming power, but a strike of surgical, insulting precision. It hit the Axiom cruiser unwavering logic directly on its primary weapons capacitor. It disabled the entire starboard battery without causing a single hull breach. The strike was not an act of war. It was a communication. It was a demonstration of a capability so profound, so complete, that it bordered on contempt. The human ships continued their dance. Their ghost-like apparitions wove a web of confusion around the Axiom fleet. They never fired another shot. They did not need to. The point had been made. Vector's 200 warships, the pride of the Ascendancy, drifted. Impotently. Their crews and their AIs were utterly paralyzed by an enemy they could not hit, could not predict, and could not comprehend. Then, a message opened on all Axiom channels. It was calm, clear, and carried the weight of absolute victory. This is Admiral Kenji Tanaka of the United Earth Fleet. You are unable to engage us. You are unable to defend yourselves. This demonstration is now complete. Release our people. Orthoclase Vector stood on his bridge, surrounded by the silent, useless might of his armada. His disciplined mind, the mind of a being who had never known true defeat, finally cracked. The horrifying truth settled upon him like a shroud of cold starlight. He was the commander of an army of stone statues trying to fight the wind. The war had been lost in the first nanosecond. Not because he was outgunned, but because he had been philosophically, fundamentally, and utterly outmaneuvered. It was the most profound defeat in the history of his species, and not a single one of his ships had been lost on the bridge of the immutable truth, a silence heavier than any before it had fallen. The holographic display showed the human fleet, motionless now. Their point had been made with devastating elegance. They held their positions, 12 points of light that had redefined the art of war. The 200 ships of the Axiom fleet drifted. Their weapons were cold. Their crews were locked in a state of logical paralysis. High Commander Orthoclase Vector's multifaceted eyes stared at the display. He was no longer seeing a tactical situation. He was seeing the end of an epic. For 3,000 years, the Axiom had been the galaxy's constant. Their power was not merely military. It was a fundamental truth of the universe, as reliable as gravity. Today, that truth had been proven false that he straightened his crystalline form. The movement was precise and deliberate. The awe had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear pragmatism. There was only one logical path forward. All echelons, stand down, he commanded. The order rippled through his fleet, not as a sound, but as a psychic wave of pure instruction. Across the sector, weapon systems powered down. Targeting sensors went dark. The immense war machine of the Ascendancy became passive. Next, Vector opened a priority channel directly to the Grand Chamber. A shimmering portal appeared before his throne. It showed the 33 silent entities of the High Council. He did not speak. He transmitted his full combat logs. Every impossible jump, every failed targeting solution, every moment of his fleet's humiliating paralysis. The data flowed into the chamber, a silent testament to their utter defeat. He then sent his formal recommendation. It was a single, concise packet of logic, report. Incursion by species designated human. Assessment. Their technological and philosophical approach to spatial dynamics renders all current axiom military doctrine obsolete. Our fleet is incapable of engaging their vessels. Further attempts at hostility will not be classified as war, but as an act of calculated self-termination. Recommendation: comply with all human demands. Immediately. We must reevaluate everything.as. The transmission closed. Vector looked back at the human ships. His mind, once a fortress of certainty, was now a whirlwind of new, unsettling calculations. He had not been defeated by a greater weapon or a larger fleet. He had been defeated by a better idea. This was not a military loss. It was an intellectual one, and that was infinitely more profound. The age of the axiom, the long, perfect, unchanging era of crystalline order, was over. He had just witnessed its end. A single axiom shuttle, looking fragile and small against the backdrop of its parent fleet, crossed the void and docked with the UES Resolve. Minutes later, the door to the flagship's bridge slid open. Captain Eva Rostova stepped through, followed by her crew. They were weary, disoriented, but alive and whole. She met the eyes of the man waiting for them, a man she had only ever seen in briefings. Admiral Kenji Tanaka. His uniform was immaculate. His posture radiated a quiet strength. Captain Rostova, Tanaka said, his voice warm. Welcome back. Your crew is a credit to Earth. We just held on, Admiral, Rostova replied. A wave of profound relief washed over her. You and the fleet did the real work. You did your part, Tanaka said. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You showed us the way. As the crew of the Venture was gratefully greeted by the flagship's crew, a communications officer turned to the Admiral. Sir, we're receiving a formal request for a channel from the Axiom flagship. From the High Commander himself. Tanaka nodded. It's time. He moved to the main holographic display. Put him through. The image of High Commander Orthoclase Vector materialized on the bridge. His crystalline form seemed less imposing than it had on the Venture's small viewer. The overwhelming arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a deep, cautious stillness. The being on the screen was not a conqueror. He was a scholar who had just discovered a new, terrifying field of study. He looked at the human admiral, acknowledging a power his civilization had never conceived of. Admiral Tanaka, Orthoclase Vector began. His translated voice was devoid of its earlier grating authority. We have much to discuss. Tanaka met the alien's gaze. He understood the universe of meaning contained in those few words. The old order was shattered. A new, uncertain era was dawning. Humanity, the chaotic upstarts from the galactic fringe, now stood at the center of a new galactic map they had unintentionally redrawn. Yes, High Commander, Tanaka replied. His tone was respectful but firm. We do. He paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. But first, let's agree on one thing. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy.